Jimmy, you're on the Mike Gallagher Show. Hey, Jimmy.
How you doing, Mike?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good. I just want to talk about one additional point of the no-knock warrant.
Sure.
The one witness that they had that stated that he heard a knock and announce was interviewed 3 times. On the first interview, he said he didn't hear anything. I'm wondering why it took 3 times for him to finally say that he heard something. Why didn't he say that in the first interview?
If that's true, that's problematic. I've never heard that, Jimmy.
That's the facts. If you look, I'm here in Louisville, Kentucky, and those are the facts. He was interviewed 3 times. On the first time, the one witness that they had.
Right. So you don't believe him.
I really don't, because here's another point, very important point.
Real quick, I want to hold you. Don't worry, I'm not gonna cut you short or anything. Okay. What about the boyfriend's admission that not only was he the one who fired first, but he also admitted that they did knock, that they pounded on the door?
Well, everything that I'm hearing, the boyfriend said he didn't. He just heard somebody knocking down the doors.
Well, but you heard, he and Breonna heard the pounding on the door, which of course kind of is the polar opposite of a no knock. Just knock the door down. They heard pounding. Hey, maybe that's right. Maybe the pounding was just the knocking down the door.
What I'm talking about, the announcement.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Well,
how come the 911 callers that called, the other witnesses, the 911 callers say, hey, they're out there shooting, send the police. If they had announced, the 911 callers wouldn't have been shouting, send the police. They're out here shooting. They would have known the police was already out there.
Do me a favor. Will you hang on with us so we can continue the conversation? Great. I appreciate it. Hang on, Jimmy. Back up with Jimmy, who is in Louisville, and I so appreciate your patience, Jimmy, because I want to continue the dialogue. And and I want to, and you have maintained that you understand that the witness who said he heard the police announcing themselves didn't say that initially.
Not initially, not in the first interview.
Right, that's what I mean, the initial interview, and then he later did. Let me do this. Let me try this. Let me stipulate, for the purpose of this conversation, that the boyfriend had no idea that it was the police at his door. Let's absolutely, because I'm presuming that's why he wasn't charged with any crime. They didn't blame him. He's in his home. Breonna Taylor is in her home. They're both in the sanctity of their home. People are knocking down their door. And whether there was a witness that heard police or not, I'm going to absolutely agree that this guy has a right to defend himself in his home. The question becomes, Jimmy, and I think you know this, and I'm interested in your reaction. The grand jury had one thing to decide. Do we charge these officers with a form of murder or not? And every single law enforcement, civil rights attorney, just about everybody across the board said, wow, that's a heavy lift when you've got a guy in the apartment firing at the police. So what do you say to that?
Well, I think murder is a little much. I do think they should have looked a little deeper and interviewed a few more witnesses to try to uncover more of the story. I think they should have been held liable for more than what came out. Like
manslaughter, maybe, or second degree, or something else, but some variation of it.
Something like that, because the facts that are laid out right now, there's more to the story. That's why there's an FBI investigation. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think they got all the facts that they needed to bring the type of justice that was warranted for this botched raid. This botched raid.
But let's go through this, and because honestly, I want to hear what your assessment would be of this botched raid, and just like I think a lot of us can try to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who's in their home in the middle of the night and the door gets burst down, and you're a lawful gun owner. I also think we ought to put ourselves in the shoes of a police officer who's been assigned a task to serve a lawful warrant that was gotten by a judge. It was apparently originally no knock, but again, the claim from the evidence is that they did knock, but let's put that aside. But you're the cop, Jimmy, and you've got, and you know that the use of lethal force is absolutely permitted if your life is in danger and you're fired upon. What would you have had a police officer do who gets fired upon? And I do know that the boyfriend confirmed that he fired first.
Right. I mean, if you're fired upon, you have to do what you have to do to defend yourself. But it never should have got that far. I mean, the raid was so botched. They never should have put themselves in position to get fired on.
But here's the problem. That's not what the grand jury was deciding, Jimmy. So I've had 2 callers now today who have, and we've had a great exchange like this one. Both of you have admitted you'd fire back too if you were a police officer. You've both admitted that.
But there's consequences to that. There's consequences to that.
What do you mean?
You killed an innocent person in the process.
No, an innocent person was shot as the innocent person's boyfriend initiated shooting at law enforcement, right?
Right. So they were shooting recklessly, and they ended up shooting an innocent person. There's got to be consequences to that.
Actually, the only recklessness is they didn't hit the guy that shot them, because he shot one of the officers first. I guess you could say, and the officer and Jimmy, the officer who did shoot recklessly, he faces felony charges and could go off to prison.
Right. He wasn't the only one shooting though. So if you're a trained professional law enforcement officer, if you have a threat and you got targets on the threat, how do you shoot an innocent person?
Wait a minute. But you just told me you'd probably fire back too. You got to do what you got to do.
I would fire at the target that's firing at me. I wouldn't.
Well, they did. They did. And because they missed him and hit her, you're saying that's a murder charge or that's a manslaughter?
That's reckless. Were they standing in single file? I mean, how do you hit?
Well, and as you've probably heard, I'm getting a lot of claims that essentially Breonna Taylor was in front of her boyfriend, sadly, in that narrow, darkened hallway. She died in the hallway, not in her bed. And that was confirmed yesterday, too. Another fact, I thought she was shot in her bed. She was in the hallway, apparently in proximity to the boyfriend, and it sounds like she was caught in the bullets that were going back and forth, that the boyfriend initiated. He fired first, hit a cop, they fired back, and your instinct, your truthful instinct was you'd fire back too. Anybody would.
I would, but Mike, it should have never got. I know that wasn't the case, but it never should have got to that situation. There was a lot of cover up. There was a lot of facts that didn't come out. It never should have got that far to where she had to lose her life and they had to shoot anyway. It should have been a knock and announce, a clear knock and announce. Everybody should have heard it. They shouldn't have had to interview him 3 times to kind of it reeks of coercion. They should have interviewed the people who actually called 911. If somebody calls 911 and says call the cops.
Yeah, I got it. So where do we go from here? What are the next steps in your mind?
Well, we let the FBI investigation do what they do, and we try to heal.
And if the FBI doesn't, well, of course we do. And incidentally, I think this kind of conversation is part of the healing process. If the FBI investigation doesn't yield the results that you hope they do, then what? We
vote, we try to heal, and we move on as nonviolently as possible.
I'm with you. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate your perspective very much. 20 minutes before the hour. I would agree 100%. We try to heal, we vote, and we try to move on.